Shalom, when the self souls but giving no praise to Yahweh, Bashem Yahshua, Bashem Kakadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and honors to you brothers doing the work of the Most High in truth and in sincerity. Yahweh's real name, of whom the world ignorantly calls God, Jehovah, or Yahweh. His real name is Yahweh. The Son's true name is Yahweh Shai, and a new prayer Yahweh, Ba Hashem, Yahweh Ba, meaning in, Ha meaning the, and Sham meaning names, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai. Real quick, don't really know I'm going to go with this, but I came across this clip, not clip, but this picture, which basically normalized buying land with your siblings and closest friends to raise families together. Modern isolation is unnatural. Your grandparents lived within walking distance of their entire extended family. Meals were shared, advice was given, and they weren't stressing about who will watch the kids. Reclaim the village. And when I came across this, I basically thought of just this idea that Esau's way hasn't worked, right? Because his way is contrary, right, to the scriptures, right? So we can start there, right? It says Isaiah 29:16. It says, "Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he had no understanding?" So when you're looking at, something that's created, can the creation basically go back and say, you didn't know what you was doing, right? No, the answer to that question is no, they can't, right? But he basically in his pride basically thinks that he's able to to basically just do whatever it is he wants, right? That's why the scriptures also say this in Psalms 50:16. It says, "But unto the wicked the Most High saith, What hast thou to declare my statutes, or that thou shouldest take my covenant in thy mouth, seeing thou hatest instruction and castest my words behind thee," right? Because just the way that nature and is supposed to be, right? He is contrary to that, right? And he pushes ideologies that are contrary to what would be normal, which is one of the reasons why people aren't having children, right? One the biggest complaint is childcare, right? But he has very meticulously rather the cost of childcare, right? But he has basically meticulously created a world such that both husband and wife have to work, right? Both and let's say, for instance, you're a family that aren't, I'll use London as an example, family that doesn't live in London, right, originally, but then there's this idea that you come London and you earn more, which you get a higher figure, right? So then you're moving away from your circle, right? And when he's setting these things up, he understands what it is that he's doing, right? Because his idea is to bring about pain and bring about chaos, right? Scriptures talk about how his heart is deep, right? We'll grab that in Psalm 64 as well, right? It says Psalm 64, and I'll start from 5. It says, "They encourage themselves in an evil matter," right? They and someone may look at the erosion as they refer to it, the village, right? And they may just think, blah blah blah, that's not that a deep, or maybe it was coincidence. But you have to understand that this man understood what would happen, right? Everyone is now isolated, right? Whether it doesn't matter now, there's more and more people be living in like apartment blocks, but you hardly know your neighbors, right? You might walk past them or whatever, what have you. Hey, you're right, Dave, right? And all of that. But other than that, you don't really know these people, right? Yet you're living in such a tight space near them. Okay, whereas before you would know your neighbors, right? Their children would play with each other and stuff like that, right? There was a sense of a quote village, and in fact there was a clip with Trevor Noah where he was basically speaking of something similar, where he was saying he finds it funny that the more developed a nation is, the more they have to basically buy the quote village back, right? Instead of having a family member to help them look after the children, they got to pay for a nanny. Instead of having someone help them with the cleaning, they got to pay for a cleaner, right? Instead of having someone to do X, they got to pay for it instead. And Esau knew this, right? Esau understood this very much, right? And then the downstream effects of it, right? The loneliness, right? The depression, okay? And as we're seeing manifest throughout the entire earth at the moment, the lack of a desire to have children. Okay, so let's read that again. Psalm 64 and 5 says, they encourage themselves in an evil matter. They commune of laying snares privily. They say, who shall see them? Right, they search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search. Right, both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. Right, so they think about these things. Right, you know, and will basically have like a Boris Johnson or a Trump, right, or some other mumbling. Is it mumbling or bumbling idiot? Right. One sec. I'm curious now. Bumbling. Yeah, bumbling. Yeah. He will basically set up a bumbling idiot to make the uninitiated think that the things that happen aren't like masterfully planned, right? Which that's all a part of its plan, because he's putting those people in positions of power, but ultimately they don't run anything. Okay, and he's actually got a an enterprise that he's basically putting together, right? So I also wanted to touch on this, right? This is Proverbs 29 and 2, right? It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, and people aren't rejoicing, right? That's why you're seeing more and more people that are yearning for the old ways, right? The whole thing about make America great again, right? They just want to go back to the old ways where things were okay, right? Where it wasn't, bill after bill after bill after bill. And, for in the case of our people, that was, that was one of the curses, right? This is Haggai 1 and 6. It says, ye have sown much and bring in little. And you'll be seeing Jake, right? Jake, will have parents, that have, or they themselves, that will be working 2, 3 jobs, right? And it just isn't enough, right? It just isn't enough. They still poor just above the bread line. Okay, it says, ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes, right? In the scriptures, I believe it's a precept here as well, right? It is not, and it should be, right? Speaks about just being subject to payments, right? It says Baruch 3 and 8. It says, behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, where thou hast scattered us for reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers which departed from the Lord our power. Okay, so we, when we're having all of these bills and etc., right, that's just part of the curses, right? But that's what you're seeing happening now to pretty much everyone. Everyone is just, complaining about the cost of living, right? The cost of this, the cost of that, right? But in moving everyone into these metropolitan, but these basically these cities, right, is the point that I want. Okay, no one is able to just go out and go to their neighbor for this, for food, or like what's the word I'm looking for, like you'd have one person who farms this, one person who farms that, one person who's a baker, etc. Whereas like now, if you live in a city, your bread comes from Hovis, right? Your the rest of your food from Tesco, Sainsbury's, or Asda, right? So it's like he has basically put this trap, and now people are just wanting, once again, they're wanting to go back to what it was supposed to be, right? Now ask the robot, as well, like how were families set up, right, in ancient Israel, right? It says, did families generally stay near each other, right? And it says in Israel, families were generally organized around patrilineal and extended family structures. The typical family unit was much larger than today's nuclear family, right? And you know what? Let me ask further down here, and I'll come back. Right? What are the origins of the nuclear family? Right? So whilst that's doing what it's doing, right? So it says, and included not just parents and children, but also grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even servants or slaves in some cases, right? And one of the things that just came to mind is, what was one of the things that he was doing, during the times of slavery? He was basically separating children from parents. Now he's not necessarily doing that directly today, but he's, separating children from grandparents, right? in the sense that once again your grandparents can be all the way over there, in a completely different country, right? Let alone a different city, okay? Meaning that you can't see them much, you can't get that exchange of knowledge, right? That you once were able to get, right? And this is once again this idea of when you're seeing set up these policies, they're not just small ideas, right? These are ideas that have been thought about, right, in darkness, right? Let's grab that, right? This is Micah 2. Oh, whoops. It says Micah 2, right, and 1, right? It says, woe to them that devise iniquity, right, and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hands. Okay, and all the different manners of evil Esau thinks up, right? He to a certain degree, because the scripture says, the Lord hath set his bounds that he cannot pass, right? But basically, he's in a position where he can, to some degree, execute it, okay? Because he's in the power seat. What does the scripture say in Job 9:24, right? It says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? Right. So if he's not, the wicked, right? Who is it? Okay. But the point is, the power of the earth has been given into his hands, right? Just for the most part to show his power, right, when he brings him down. Okay. But that is certainly part of the what we're seeing here. The separation of family is certainly part of his evil plan, right? It may not, once again, it may look just like how is that beneficial? But when you look at this place, right, you can tell that it truly is, beneficial and part of it to him, right, and part of his wider agenda. Okay, so let's carry on. Right, it says the family structure, right? The Bayath Abba, right? Bayath meaning house, right? Abba, father, right? So it says the primary family unit was that, right? House of the father included a male patriarch, right? Because this thing of ours, contrary to what them small hats be doing, right, is a patrilineal one. This is Numbers 1:18. It says, and they assembled all the congregation, right, together on the first day of the second month, right, and they declared their pedigrees and their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upwards, by their polls, right? Basically going into how families were were basically set up by way of the father. Okay, so let's carry on, right? So we see here, it says include a male patriarch, his wife or wives, which I found interesting that it even mentioned this, because you get individuals that say that a man can't have another wife, but that's contrary to the scriptures, right? This is Numbers Exodus, slacking. That's Exodus 21:10. If you take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and the duty of marriage shall he not diminish. Now, you get individuals that will say, reference, some of the writings of the Apostle Paul, right, about having one wife. But if you read, if you consider everything, Apostle Paul also said he'd rather you have no wives, right? So basically the understanding there is just like, look, yeah, you can, let's grab it in the scriptures, right? This is 1 Corinthians 6, right, and 12. It says, all things are lawful unto me, but not all things are expedient. So yeah, you can have multiple wives, right, but it's not necessarily expedient, all right, especially right now, as we're just doing this battle, because women are a distraction. Okay, but real soon you're going to start having women just showing up all over the place, right, because we're coming into that time of Isaiah 4:1. I did a video yesterday doing a landback from this guy MTR, where he was basically talking about you have 300,000 American so-called black women that have lost their jobs in the last 3 months. Right, but let me finish. This is all things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Okay, and really that's 1 Corinthians 10:23. More prefer this one. So all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Right, and I like this one just because you know, scriptures also talk about, let everything be done unto edification and stuff like that. But let's carry on. So I found it interesting that it even mentioned this, but you get individuals that will say otherwise, right? It says his sons and their families, and sometimes unmarried daughters, right? Let me see one thing real quick. What is it? This is Sirach, yes, 42 and 20, right? It says the father of 42 and 9, fucking 20, 42 and 9 says the father waketh for the daughter when no man knoweth, and the care of her taketh away sleep. When she is young, lest she pass away the flower of her age, and being married, lest she be hated. In her virginity, lest she should be found and gotten with child in her father's house, right? And having an husband, lest she should misbehave herself. And when she is married, lest she should be barren, right? So the point that I wanted there was, while still being in her father's house, okay? So basically, normally would, leave, her father's family, right, and then move to the husband, because the husband would become her new head, right? Which, when you look into the law of giving oaths, right, a woman's what do you call it? A woman's what's the word? A woman's a woman's oath, right, could be disannulled by her father or disannulled by her husband, right? But basically, when she was unmarried, her father, and when she was married, her husband. Okay, so it goes on to say patrilineal descent determine inheritance. We've read that. I didn't really touch it, but we read in Numbers, right, about how you had the basically everything was set up by the father's house, right, tribal affiliation and land rights, right, which there is a what you call. I'm trying to remember the law, right, but basically KJV land can't pass between tribes. Yeah, so let's look up. That's the one that I want. It says Numbers 36, right, and 9, right? It says let me read into this. Right, Numbers 36 from 6, right? It says, this is the thing which the Lord Yahweh doth command concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry to whom they think best. Only to the family of the tribe of their father shall they marry. It says, so shall not the inheritance of the children of Israel remove from tribe to tribe, for every one of the children of Israel shall keep himself to the inheritance, right, of the tribe of his fathers. And every daughter that possesseth an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be wife unto one of the family of the tribe of her father, that the children of Israel may enjoy every man the inheritance of his fathers. Right? Neither shall the inheritance remove from one tribe to another, but every one of the tribes of the children of Israel shall keep himself to his own inheritance. Okay. We'll carry on. It says extended kinship, right? So families were nested within larger clan or tribal groupings. A clan, right, was made up of multiple Bayatha households, and multiple clans formed a tribe, right? These kinship groups provided social, economic, military, and religious cohesion, right? The families typically lived near one another, especially in rural villages and tribal areas. Sons often built their homes near or attached to their father's house, creating a kind of compound or cluster of homes, right? This physical closeness allowed for cooperation in agriculture, child rearing, defense, and care for the elderly, right? There weren't no bloody what you have now of your parents are just put in homes. Okay, there was none of that. Okay. Yes, we saw that, inherited through the male line, and then also arranged in the same tribal extended clan, help preserve land and social ties, and then so would you call it? That's pretty much it, right? And good thing when you're using these robots, right, is to always just ask it, "Are you sure?" Right? Because I'll be using it at work and stuff, and then like it's giving me stuff. I'm like, you're not right, and then you ask it, "Are you sure?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and stuff like that, But once again, just a good tip to do, right? Just be asking it yes or no. Are you rather like, are you sure? Okay, so earlier on in the lesson that I just asked, I was like, yo, what are the origins of the nuclear family? Read this and close it out. Right, so the nuclear family, a household consisting of two parents and children, has ancient roots but became especially prominent under specific historical and social conditions, right? So I thought it would have been, something that was, would you call it, quite relatively new. But it says prehistoric and tribal. It says small family units existed in larger kinship or tribal groups. However, these were rarely isolated, right? Extended family ties were still central. It says in ancient Greece and Rome, households, oikos or domus, could be nuclear but often included extended family, servants and slaves. Still, some philosophical and legal ideas from Rome emphasize the autonomy of father-led households, laying a foundation for nuclear models. Medieval Europe, peasants' families often lived in extended or multi-family homes, but nuclear families began appearing among landless laborers or urban dwellers. And then post-industrial revolution. So basically saying that there was there has been sprinklings of it in history, right? But it says the true rise of the nuclear family happened in the Western Europe and North America during and after the Industrial Revolution. Urbanization and wage labor separated work from home, making smaller mobile family units more practical. Legal and cultural changes reinforced this model. It says with modernization, the nuclear family spread globally, often replacing or modifying the traditional extended family system. Right, so it's very much so there have been remnants, rather they've been resemblance. I'm trying to think of the word, but there's been examples of it throughout history, but it really stuck during the 18th and 19th, from the 18th and 19th century. Coming from where? Coming from Western Europe and North America. Okay. So that's it. That nuclear family is, part of that one. In fact, I'll just end with that. So we're gonna end with just a whole bunch of reading. It's Habakkuk 2, right, and 15. So woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, right, representing philosophies, right, that puttest thy bottle to him, makes him drunken also, that thou mayest look on their nakedness. Okay. Because nowadays, the idea of looking after your parents into their old age is like, people are like, why would I do that? A lot of Westerns, the idea of like an elderly relative moving in is alien. Okay, but then they'd rather put their family member in a home, right? And let's be honest, looking after an elderly person, especially as their health starts to decline, right, is hard. However, if you have this model of an extended family, right, it's not as difficult, right? But like I said, I just found that interesting, right? Just this idea of people rejecting ease way, basically. Ease way is just not, it just doesn't work. Okay, and more people are going to start realizing that, and more people are going to start and continue to reject it. So as always, Lord, that was edifying. Till next time, we say shalom.